All right, well, we'll call meeting number 1507, our workshop, to order. We don't have any changes to the agenda, do we, Dr. Lake?
That is correct.
All right, so could I have a motion to approve the agenda as it was presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We'll do roll call like we did in our previous meeting. So Karen is a yes. Mike Shamia?
Yes.
Just going to go around the screen. Matt Alonso?
Yes.
Mike Tishless?
Yes.
Christy Watts?
Yes.
Kathy Lorenz?
Yes.
Jennifer Miller?
Yes.
And that is everybody. Motion carries 7-0. I did get everybody right. Okay. And that takes us to 3.02. We have a resolution in response to the health emergency that's going on, with a recommendation that we approve the resolution as it is presented. We're not going to read that out loud, but you all had a chance to look at that, and it's online in our board docs. May I have a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion by Jennifer, and somebody second?
Second by Matt.
Thank you, Matt. All right, so again, roll call. Karen Schuster's a yes. Mike Shamia has to unmute.
Sorry, yes.
That's all right. Matt Alonso.
Yes.
All right, Kathy Lorenz.
Yes.
Christy Watts.
Yes.
Mike Tishless.
Yes.
And Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 7-0. All right, so then that takes us to our discussion topics. 4.01 is our strategic planning and compass goals. And Tony, I'll turn that over to you.
Absolutely. So as you know, since we've been on this journey the last few years, this goes back to our strategic plan conversation and listening to our community with our strategic plan group that we had together, as well as listening and learning that we continue to do yearly. And so we have updated compass goals for you. Again, when we just to remind everybody, we want, strategic plans can be a stagnant document. They're not a living document. We want this to be a living document that doesn't just sit on a shelf somewhere. And so again, the organization of our work is investigate, research, implement. It shows the movement of our work throughout the document. And so what the team is going to do for you all tonight is highlight things that are new in the investigation, something that's moved up a level. They're not going to read every single one. If something's staying in implement, they may not even mention that. So don't think, oh, that's not important or anything like that. We're just trying, for the essence of time, and you guys have had that document for almost 2 weeks, I think, to look at it and to provide us feedback. And again, tonight, any feedback we get through our conversations, we'll go back in and tweak it. And then again, it'll just be for the record, because it doesn't require your formal approval of those goals, but we'll put it in for the record like we did last year at the May board meeting. And then that'll be setting us up for our work as we move forward in the 2021 school year. Any questions before we get started?
Tony, I was dropped out of the meeting for just a second. Did you say we're going to go ahead and do the presentations and we'll save discussion and questions for
Yes.
all at the end of each section?
Well, let me ask you guys that. Would you prefer to do it while it's fresh in your mind at the end of each section? Because each department is going to do theirs. You guys want to do it that way? It might stay fresher in your mind that way. You want to
Let's
do
do
that?
that, each department.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So Tara, I think you're up.
I am also muted. All right, so are we going to share the screen, or should I just reference it based on the document that I have?
Does Colin have it? If Colin has it, why don't we have him share
I
it?
just shared it with Colin just now. So,
Okay, perfect.
There we go.
Here. Yep, I like that.
All right, so Colin, if you can scroll down to the teaching and learning side of this. I think one of the important things to note about this document is the revision in format that we've made. You'll notice that compared to last year's compass, we have all unified how we present our information. And what that's meant for teaching and learning is that we have increased the number of whats, which are those big ideas, that we are addressing. So the first one being social emotional learning, the second one being professional learning around meeting the diverse needs of kids, the third being really that focus on curriculum instruction and assessment, and the fourth being our systems of support to make sure we have good systems that make all of these things come together. So what this allowed us to do was to be able to really articulate more of the work that previously was behind the scenes of our Compass goal. We had a lot of documents that went into more detail than the public facing document did. So our hope with the way this is formatted now is that people can see more of the transparency of the work that's happening underneath those big ideas that are ongoing work. So when we look at social emotional learning, you can see the elements in orange there. And just a reminder, anything that is black is a new element. Anything that is orange has moved up from where it was previously. So all of these implements in orange right now had previously been in research. And then anything in green is something that is an ongoing, continued piece of work. So you can see under social emotional, we've moved things up into orange. There are no greens that are continuing at this time. And then we've added some additional ones. So probably the biggest thing last year, and first of all, let me say, I'm going to do the quick overview, but we have all of our directors also on for this portion of the workshop so that they can speak to and have discussion around these different topics if you have additional questions or additional thoughts about where we should go with them. So moving up, more of our work with instructional or with restorative practices. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, you're good, Colin. Just keep it right there. I said moving up. I meant moving up from research to implement. Second step, as we've talked about in a previous board workshop, we're moving that from the research stage where we've been doing some pilot work with that to full implementation. Doing some more work around digital and media literacy using common sense media resources, moving those into implementation as well. And then, although second step has been primarily an elementary curriculum, we really need to work on the middle school element of social emotional learning. So middle school has selected the Character Strong program as a baseline of social emotional instruction that will be for all of our students. So those have all moved up from research into implement. And then going into the research, we want to do more work around trauma embedded practices, integrating social emotional skills into progress reports. And this goes along with our work, which we are temporarily calling Portrait of a Graduate. I don't expect that it's going to stay that way, but how do we acknowledge and recognize that social emotional skills are really skills for success for students in the long run? And then continuing to support curriculum resources in the guidance department specifically that kind of layer those tiers of student need. And then for investigation, these are two new ones completely. Youth court. There are districts around the area who do youth courts where there's actually a level of student voice in decision making for their peers. That's something we don't know if we want to do within Limburg, but to investigate that. And then ACT Tessera, which we often call the Tesseract. It's kind of an inside joke. That is a social emotional assessment that ACT provides. So those are the big ideas around social emotional learning. If we want to talk about those before we move on to professional learning and building capacity of staff.
I have a question, Tara, about youth court that you're investigating. Could you just maybe, I don't know how far you've gone into it, but could you speak briefly to, some of what you've seen, any models of that in practice out there? What does that typically look like?
So the one model that I'm aware of, and I know it's not the only model, and I don't know that it would be the model that's appropriate for us, but the one model that I am aware of specifically is a school district in St. Charles County where they've actually partnered with their juvenile detention office, and they do some of that work in conjunction with the school, as opposed to that being something that always happens outside of the school. And it's a way for students to kind of learn the skills of being lawyers and judges and so forth. And families obviously agree to participate in that format as opposed to doing traditional discipline practices, either through the juvenile court or through the school system. Again, I don't know that that would be the model that we would want to put into place within Limburg, but that's the one that I'm familiar with, and I'm sure that there are different iterations of that.
Okay.
Mike, let me jump in there. So as a high school principal, I had this, and it was things for like truancy, Potentially, if somebody first offense, stole something at school, minor kinds of things, and it keeps the court systems from being bogged down, but it also gives that responsibility and that ownership back to the kids in the school. And it has worked very, very well in when I was a high school principal with kids and communities, and typically kids wouldn't want it to go out and get diversion or possibly probation if it could go back through the youth court system. Now, multiple offense kinds of things, that's not an option, but it's a good way for us to teach our kids. And that's what we want to be about, is not necessarily disciplining them or getting them in trouble, for a lack of a better word. We want them to learn from the situation and grow. And what better place than in a school environment being led by educators and kids that have an interest in that.
Yeah, I don't know how, maybe as Tara said, how appropriate it may be, but, and I did have a question on what types of offenses, which you've answered, Tony. So it sounds like they're very moderate, as you said, first time and so forth. But it is, it's an interesting concept insofar as getting students involved. I'll agree with that.
And Mike, I've seen it in person. It's at Hardin Middle School. I actually witnessed it and got to participate. It's amazing. So I'm
Okay.
glad that it's on the investigative piece, but it took them, it kind of like catapulted their school, with some suspensions that they had going on and some fights and stuff. Not that we're dealing with that. We're not in Limburg, but just, absolutely the sense of belonging increased in their school. But to witness it, it was so powerful. It was awesome.
So this was students engaging students in this sort of quasi-court structure where basically your peers are the ones who are, I guess, questioning you. And in the end, they would recommend a disciplinary action, right?
Yeah, with adults there. The judge there and
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yes, but the flavor of it was powerful. The ownership, the sense of belonging. I'm glad we're investigating it.
Sure. Good. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Other questions around our social emotional learning work? Okay. We'll go on to professional learning. There's some definite exciting things within professional learning. Teacher leadership cohort, we are getting ready to roll this out with our elementary teachers, that they can go through a leadership cohort that will prepare them to eventually potentially participate in Limburg Aspiring Principals Academy, which is also on here. And that is done in conjunction with the Human Resources Department with Dr. McKinney. But teacher leadership cohort is really designed to support those teachers who are serving on the building leadership team, the BLT, in order to help them understand kind of better the structures around leadership, their role as teacher leaders, understanding their own strengths and how to collaborate with colleagues in a leadership role. So that's one thing we are going to implement. Just Schools equity training. As you know, we've done a lot of work with equity training with administrators over the course of this year, and really starting to work on how we infuse that same training with our teaching staff. So one of the biggest things with this is getting that as a part of our new teacher induction process within that second year of teacher training, that the equity work is a big part of that training. So that would be implemented this year. Continuing on with our project-based learning cohorts. And then in terms of moving up from research, we've done a lot of work with the technology audit. And one of the things that came through from the technology audit is we also need to really be focusing on professional learning for our classified staff within the technology department. So focusing on what kind of professional learning they need for when we implement and integrate new technology tools to support that on the back end. Research really remains, those are two pieces that we're really excited about. You might have heard of systems called badging. We're calling them micro-credentialing, that when teachers go through some professional learning, that they demonstrate mastery and they can be proud of that, and how we develop a system in order to say this teacher is an expert in this skill set, this teacher is an expert in this skill set, and to be able to recognize teachers for the professional learning that they've done. And then continuing our work around expectations and resources for standards-based instruction. So as you know, we had Rick Wormley come in this year and do a lot of professional learning with our staff. And there's still a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of what are the layers of expectations we have at the various levels for implementing that work. Questions around professional learning?
Tara, real quick on the micro credentials, that's within Limburg, right?
Correct, correct. So we've thought about, laptop stickers, you can be proud, or when we're back in school outside your door, how we can recognize the learning that has happened and demonstrate the expertise of our teaching staff.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, well then we can move on to engaging in collaborative assessment. And again, these whats are really our big ideas that we know are never gonna move away. We're always going to be doing some level of work in those areas. One of the big things that's an implement going into next year, as you know, we've been partners with, we've been a part of the Missouri Assessment Partnership, MOAP, and through that, trying to find an alternative at the state level for a state assessment. That timeline is moving slower than what we would like to move. So working with the assessment committee in determining for next year what tool we can put into place to actually measure student growth of learning and start using that and communicating that with parents. So that committee is actually meeting next month, and we'll know more after that time what tool we'll actually be putting into place next year. So that's an implement. Continuing to work with equity standards and integrating into curriculum revisions. That process started this year as we started working on research related to the ELA curriculum and being really thoughtful about ELA curriculum and how we are ensuring that equity is a component of that curriculum. The Career Advisory Council, that is something that has been in development and working with business partnerships, and that will go into full implementation next year. And that council will really provide us a lot of support in terms of not just our CTE programs like PLTW, but also helping us to develop additional program expansion. What does the workforce look like? What are the needs? How can we access these business partners to come in and provide instruction for our students around topics of workforce preparedness? So those are some big ideas within that implement. And then, as I said before, green are those things that we're continuing to work for. In terms of research, one of the things that we've done is we have not in the past had ELL instruction as part of our curriculum development cycle. So that has been added in, and they fall into a research year for looking at our structures for that. And that'll just add a level of systematic support for our English language learners. Also looking at just how do we design instructional models that are student-centered. One of our challenges right now is our teachers, there's a lot we're doing. There's a lot of change that's happening, and helping them to figure out and develop structures of how we integrate all of these different pieces. So when we're talking about literacy and we're talking about project-based learning, how do these things come together? When they've got a new resource material in MySci, how does that fuse with all of this? Because it can often seem like one more thing. How do we pull those structures together so they become more integrated, and providing more support for that for our teachers? Doing further research on the IB program and advanced placement capstone. That was a part of our program evaluation from the honors program evaluation in the fall, and will be a conversation at the May curriculum update for the board meeting as well. And then looking at how we can expand family and consumer science and computer science status into our CTE programs. Currently, those programs are not within CTE, but they can be and should be. And so working on what processes do we need to take in order to move those into that direction. K-12 field trip audit. One of the things that we continue to talk about is what's the quality of our field trips? What's the end outcome of field trips? What's the purpose of field trips? What's the redundancy of field trips? So really starting to do a deep analysis of that so we can make some guidelines for future improvements in that area. And then you can see and investigate. I find it interesting that we have alternative methods of instruction in Investigate, because we are currently doing alternative methods of instruction. And that's been fast tracked. And while not finished in terms of long-term, what would be our alternative methods of instruction, we have definitely learned a lot through virtual learning that will enhance what we end up doing. So even though it's written as an Investigate, I think we've pretty much moved that up to implement since the original drafting of this document. Also looking at some things, and some of these investigations already happened. Aviation program at the high school, looking at how we can develop programming around that. We had some teachers who participated in a conference and site visits earlier this year. And really were intrigued. There's a lot out there in terms of drone management, a lot of mathematical and science elements that fit within this. So how we can potentially look to this as a future program, which then moves into the idea of an academy structure at the high school, as we're looking at high school programming, how we are able to give kids options that are career driven for what the high school can look like. So we've seen a lot of schools where there are specific academies. So if you are interested in the humanities, you are kind of clustered into this component, this location of the high school, and your classes are more driven towards that. They include more workplace preparedness in the humanities. The same would be true if you were doing a biomedical academy. So just continuing to investigate what that would look like as we are redesigning so much of Limburg High School as well. Elementary seminars, a lot of this goes into the idea of how we also can become competency-based. So we've talked a lot about standards-based instruction and how we move students towards mastering priority standards, but how do we start to look at that in a different way and design opportunities for kids to master content that they know they need, but within shorter segments of time. We've seen some models with this in some of the site visits that we've done, and it's an exciting thing for us to investigate and think about how kids can have more ownership, even at the elementary, of knowing these are the skills I need. What specialized class can I take that's going to infuse those skills and give me an opportunity to do something that I'm really passionate about? And that similar to the idea of a high school winter session, where something similar could happen at the high school. As you know, with the new calendar that's going into place next year, our semesters are not even. There is about a 3-week difference between first semester and second semester. So starting to look at what could we do differently to equalize our semesters for those classes that do have, you know, they repeat from semester to semester, they're not year-long courses. Could there be opportunities for us to do something with students in a winter session that would equalize the semester length for first and second semester, but still provide a really exciting learning opportunity that kids would have choice and voice in determining, and still would be very rigorous and relevant at the same time. So that's another layer of investigation. And then I think as you know, we've been talking about AVID, the College Readiness program, and how we can continue to research that as we investigate what that looks like in Limburg specifically. So I know that's a lot. That's really, so much of this is at the heart of what we do within teaching and learning. What questions do you have? All right. You guys are very patient because I'm talking at you a lot. I'm sorry, Christy, what?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to comment. It's just so nice to see us think of how can we educate the children differently? How can we give them different opportunities? And the aviation thing, oh my gosh, that's so cool. The winter semester, do something neat. It's really going to set us apart. So I think that's fantastic.
Perfect. And then the last one we have is really about around our systems, like some of the structures we have, more of the behind the scenes stuff that students don't necessarily see, but really help us to make sure all of those other pieces come together. So each year we do multiple, we call them walkthroughs or learning walks, where we are visiting schools and peers are giving positive reinforcement. And when I say peers, I mean principals are visiting each other and seeing things in their schools. And it does a number of things. It allows, first of all, that outside feedback. It also allows our principals to learn from one another and steal ideas from one another when they see live in the building what's happening. So wanting to restructure what those learning walks look like. Wanting to put into place a family education series. There have been a number of topics that have come up where families are like, oh, we'd love to know more about this. And I think after the success of Rick Wormley and the number of parents who came to that, it really reinforces that there's a desire to know more about some of these big ideas that we're doing and to figure out what that means for their own children. Character education, leadership redesign, we're doing some restructuring around that program as well to make it more inclusive of elementary, middle, and high school, as opposed to having one coordinator who oversees the entire program. This next one I'm really excited about, collaboration with local preschools for kindergarten readiness. We actually have a meeting scheduled next week where we have a preschool coalition that's starting. Ultimately, all of our students who are attending private preschools, they're coming to us for kindergarten. So how do we work together in support of kids and what kindergarten readiness really looks like, and share professional learning resources in support of our incoming kindergartners? So again, another structural element there. We're working with Joelle on an instructional space furniture catalog to really make, as we talk about flexible seating, how do we do flexible seating without it being like throwing a dart at a dartboard? That we actually have some structures in place where we say, here's your menu of options to create the classroom environment that's going to have the flexibility that you need. So making a catalog that will allow principals and building leaders to be able to determine what the best resources are. Let's see, I lost my place. Personalized professional learning, a lot of that goes back to badging as well, the micro-credentialing and how we develop those systems. And then this next section, all in orange, these are elements of the technology compass that kind of lived elsewhere that we've moved into this document, and all comes back from the technology audit. So we've done a lot of research, a lot of work this year around researching software and app catalogs. We now have a partnership with Education Framework to put that into place and implement that for next year. So that's going to be great in terms of the privacy work we know we needed to do with the technology usage that we have within the district. Implementing a new cell phone and disaster recovery procedures. This is all work that's been happening through the Technology Board Advisory this year and will go into effect for next school year. Equitable blended learning platforms. So that's a lot of the work around Canvas. And we definitely, one of the things that we've learned from virtual learning is it is accelerating the desire of teachers to want to become proficient in Canvas and the identified needs. So continuing to implement that work. And then Dominic's been doing a great job with our systems upgrades and working on doing a technology security assessment. And then we've got work to do still with some website upgrades that are on the docket for this summer. In terms of research, just some components of cleaning things up, how we can move to some online records and what does records retention look like for that, continuing the research around transitioning early childhood special education to a Limburg early childhood special education. So that work is continuing, or is actually moving up from investigate, I should say. Continuing to do some work on summer school. And as I've shared with you, we've got a task force in place for summer school for this year that I look forward to sharing with you soon what's coming out of that. But even beyond that, we were looking at how do we help kids access summer school in a different way? Because families with transportation, they were able to access it, but families without in the summer, that was a difficulty. So continuing to work through what are our options for supporting all kids when they have a need of summer school for intervention. Elementary trimesters, another thing that's been in research mode, and I've shared with you about moving to that as we do some revisions around elementary report card. Looking at elementary library time structure, the state has done some initial recommendations and different classifications about what that structure needs to look like. So that means we also need to revisit whether or not we are really providing a model library program based on state recommendations. Looking at active classroom design, which really goes back to a lot of the flexible seating components, how we ensure that students have a classroom that meets the learning needs that they have. Esports, this has been one we've talked about for quite a bit, but starting to really research how we can provide esports opportunities. This is a growing field. We've got regional schools who are starting to develop esports teams. We've got a local university who is renowned for their esports teams. How do we start to look at providing similar opportunities for Limburg students? And then just continuing to track our systems for ensuring that essential professional learning is happening for everyone. We've gotten some good things in play, but cleaning that up and developing a system where it houses it all in one place. And then finally on Investigate, an instructional fidelity audit. So just as we put curriculum into place, what does it look like in terms of the actual implementation? How do those universals continue to remain in play in our classrooms after curriculum is written, and how we evaluate that? So those are the big ideas around our systems supports. Any questions or thoughts? Directors, is there anything you want to add to any of the topics?
Nope, I think we're good.
If I can just add one thing, I know I'm not sure if Beth had shared this previously, the ongoing and the complete, you'll see those at the end of each of our sections. So when we finish different elements of our compass plan, if there's something that we're going to continue to do, but it doesn't require us to do like that initial work and that getting it off the ground, it'll become an ongoing. That way it's just tracking. These things still happen. Just because they come off the compass plan doesn't mean we're finished with them. And then the complete, those are things that are truly like, we did it. There's not any more work to do with it. And it's just, you know, made note of in that regard.
And Tara doesn't have any of these, but there's another header that says strategically abandoned. And so that goes down with these bottom three as well. If there was something we investigated and then decided we weren't going to go in that direction, you'll see that header.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And if there aren't any questions for our directors, thank you for coming on and being a part of this, and you don't need to stay.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to human resources?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Again, Tara said we're highlighting many of the things that are new or moving. So I'm going to go through a few things. I won't touch on everything, but if you have any questions about anything on the report, I'm happy to answer those. We break our work into three main areas based on the strategic plan, and that is recruitment of great staff, retention of those staff, and then service to the staff. So I'll start with on the retention side, some new items and some moving items. First one that I'll highlight is the total compensation report. And this is a line item report that each employee will receive that really outlines the district's total investment, not just salary in that person. Health, vision, tuition reimbursement, dental benefits, the retirement contribution. You know, we're not only competing with other public schools in our area, but we're competing against other professions and private schools. And so some of those things, specifically retirement contribution, is something that is really not even competitive when you look at the private side. So we just want our people to know that, yes, salaries are important and we're working on those, and we've made great gains in improving our salary schedule. But there's some other things that Limburg does really well. Tuition reimbursement, health, dental, and vision benefits to be noted as one or a couple. Another piece on that item is, this comes from our equity work. This is called affinity groups, pardon me. And we've done a lot of learning about equity and recruitment and retention of teachers from diverse backgrounds, teachers of color. And equity groups, as we've learned, they ensure that teachers from diverse backgrounds and teachers of color feel connected. They provide teachers the opportunity to be and stay connected with peers from similar background. And I can tell you that research in all of education, isolation is often listed as a #1 reason that teachers leave the field, whether they leave a district or the field altogether. And this initiative really is designed to make sure that teachers keep connected with people in their peer group, and they have mentors and they have regular meetings and they do real work together. But again, keeping that connection, not only with Limburg, but people that have been on the same path and journey that they've been on. Also, this year, we looking forward to implementing the recommendations from our Extra Duty, Extra Pay Study Committee. This was a committee made up of teachers and administrators that met all year on a regular basis. We studied this because as studying some other things, in particular our teacher salary schedule, we noted that our Extra Duty, Extra Pay structure needed work. And then as we dug a little deeper, we noted that even some criteria and some of the ways we categorize these positions needed to be reviewed. So that committee has come forward with 3 recommendations. The implementation process will be to talk about those recommendations with Dr. Lake and the cabinet, and then work through the implementation through this school year. The 3 recommendations specifically are to set a starting pay schedule that's not connected with the teacher salary schedule. So currently we have an Extra Duty, Extra Pay schedule that's based on a percentage of the starting teacher pay. And what that does is it connects teacher starting pay with extra duty in a way that constrains both of those salary schedules. So by separating those, there's ways to have some more agility in how much we pay starting teachers, and it allows us to have some agility with regard to how we compensate extra duty, extra pay. Second recommendation is that we remove teaching and learning positions from Extra Duty, Extra Pay Committee's purview. So every year, the Extra Duty, Extra Pay Committee meets and they look at what positions are possibly proposed and new and should be recommended as additions to the budget. And then they talk about some that maybe are no longer relevant and don't have participation or sponsors, and they should be removed from the budget. A number of these positions are really teaching and learning positions that can't be removed. And a couple of examples of that would be department chairs, for instance, or the extra weeks that we pay counselors in the summer, or curriculum writers. Those really are not positions that are elective. They are not extracurricular. They're positions that we have to have, and we really need Tara and her team to be making decisions about those positions rather than a committee of people that really are designed and their function is to talk about extracurricular activities and clubs. Thirdly, the group agreed that the way the criteria is established, there's not a lot of room for exploration. One of the criteria for a club being funded has to do with its sustainability. And as we know, education is supposed to be an exploratory endeavor many times. And so what the committee's recommended is that we set aside some discretionary funds for principals to fund some clubs that, you know, they're really hot right now. People want to explore this topic. There's a sponsor willing to do it. There's a lot of student interest. The principal could then fund that. And then if it doesn't maintain, if it's not a sustained interest, then it can go away and the principal can divert that money then the next year to something else. If it continues to be a club with a lot of interest, it takes off and it's got sustainability, then we would propose it for the Extra Duty, Extra Pay Committee, that budget, permanent budget, and it would continue to live there. And then the principal could use the money for further exploration the next year. So those are kind of some hot topics on the retention side. Are there any, and of course there are many more things that we're doing, but are there any things that, or anything that you heard that I can add to from the retention side? I would notice that we've got some ongoings. Limburg Aspiring Principals Academy, Tara mentioned that. We're working in concert with Ronnie and Craig and their department, and that is a program that will begin this year with regard to attracting applicants and starting their work. If there aren't questions, I'll remove to the recruitment side. You see a lot of green there, and those are things that really we can't do just once. These are things that the work should continue, and it's important work. We don't want to put it as completed because it's not complete, but the arc for this work is more than a single school year. And so we've got a lot of things on the implement that we're going to continue to do because that work pays off over time. I would mention a couple of things that we're researching under recruitment. And one is we have a very strong tuition reimbursement program at Limburg. It's a great marketing tool. It's one of the best in the county, no doubt, with regard to how much we reimburse and the number of people that are allowed into that program, which is unlimited. Anybody that is eligible gets in. There are some districts where there's a pool of money, and once the pool is gone, then that's the end of tuition reimbursement. Ours does not work that way. Some examples of why we're studying tuition reimbursement, researching it this year and that'll be a project with NEA, has to do with some outdated language, really, some basic housekeeping, but some fairly significant things. It was last revised in 2010, so it's time for it to be looked at. I'll give you one example of something we dealt with in the negotiations process that will change this year, but it led to looking at quite a bit of other items, and that is online. We had an online restriction that only 6 hours of online education would be reimbursed. Well, this was written at a time when online degrees were not as reputable as they are today. The schools that offered online were not oftentimes even schools that were recognized by the district, but now every university has online opportunities, and so we don't want to restrict that. We continue to look for NCATE certification and those credentials that universities need, but online is not something that we are going to restrict any longer. Another piece is how many hours we allow people to be reimbursed for, and then the amount that we reimburse for per hour. These things may not change, but we just need to re-examine them. Again, it's been 10 years since there's been a full study of that program. Also, we're looking into a video screening tool. This was an investigate. Our current situation forced us to do a lot of, or all, video Zoom interviews. And in the past, we've looked at this from an investigation standpoint as, could we add this to the screener? There are some companies that that provide a product that is a basic set of questions that a person answers in video format. You add that to your paper screening process, just adds another dimension, another layer, more information to the screener. So we push that up because we've had success with our Zoom interviews, and we feel like if principals could see a face and hear some words and to answer some basic questions while they're doing the paper screenings, that would really add a nice layer and dimension. On the serve side, I would say that the first item I'll point out is Limburg Early Childhood Education Reorganization. This is a new item. The board has heard about this in a workshop before, but again, this is the year that we will work to implement this, and it's mainly two pieces. We want to establish an education program during school hours, and then a before and after school care program. So we're separating the child care from the education side. And then along with that, we establish a certified teacher pay scale that reflects the time that is spent on the education side, and then also reflects the time on the before and after child care side. Also, we are, as you know, we've talked about this. We have, as part of our ongoing study of all contracts and services, we received our RFQs for legal services, and that process is moving forward. Forecast 5 is a tool that does a lot of projection and demographic work, but we are using it specifically in HR as a third-party enrollment projection tool. We oftentimes, we've in the past done our own enrollment projections, and we've had success, no doubt about it. But Forecast 5 is a third-party projection tool that we can measure against what we see in our projections. So we'll review our projections. We'll look at Forecast 5 right alongside and do some data triangulation to see, are we way off? Are we very close? And it just gives us another layer of accuracy with regard to enrollment projections. We will also be doing an RFP for insurance broker. Again, this is a study of all contracts and services. We don't have terrible service right now. We're happy with the service that we've gotten, but we always want to look and ensure that we're getting the best services for the best cost. So this is a routine RFP, and we'll go through that process starting this year. We do have some other research items, and one that has moved up is a permanent substitute teacher or temporary staff at every building. Every district struggles with substitute teacher shortages. We've had good placement at Limburg, between 85 and 95% placement, but anytime that you have to scramble and move people around to get a substitute in front of a class, it causes problems, and we'd rather have more than enough subs. One way we've mitigated that is we've put in place a cadre of permanent substitutes that they are, right now there's 6 of those, and when we're in session, they take the first 6 jobs off the books, and then that's allows us to have a head start. What we'd like to do is expand that possibly and have one for every building, and then that building could use that person as they see fit. And if they had a day where they didn't need a sub, that person would resort back to the general pool, and we would certainly have things for them to do. There's never a day where we couldn't use an extra substitute teacher or 2. So those are some of the highlights from our report, and I didn't cover certainly everything, but I'm happy to answer questions on any of it if there are any.
So Brian, I did have 2 things. Thank you for looking into the tuition reimbursement part and refreshing that. 10 years, I think, is quite a long time, and colleges have evolved from there. So thank you. The other one was on the, Colin, go up a little bit, move up a little bit. What was it? Oh, the video screening. I've always been curious about this. So I know that it happens in major companies everywhere. How does that work with equal opportunity? Like, does it matter? Some mask the voice, I think, so that you can't tell what nationality or group they come from. What have you found on that?
Good question. So several districts are doing this now, and our understanding is as long as we ask the exact questions to everybody, then it's considered part of a fair process. There's a company called RIVS, R-I-V-S. They're connected with Talent Ed. Right now, Talent Ed is the software with which we manage our online applications, our personnel records, and our performance reviews. And really, they set up an interview where a person has the question. There's a couple ways to do this. So the way RIVS works is they have written questions that a person sets up, like I am right now, into a Zoom or it's not Zoom, but like this, and they respond to written questions, and the questions are exactly the same. There's no, that way there's no difference in how they're asked, or there's no misunderstandings. It's set up just through written. We also studied Pattonville, and they do it a little differently. They do it through a format like Zoom, and they have an HR professional ask the same questions of every person, but it is conversational in that there's an interviewer and there's a responder. Really it comes down to my understanding, not a lawyer, but I listen to them a lot, is in interview processes, you just need to be consistent. The same questions need to be asked. Everyone needs to be given the same chance at that position. And there are ways to do that, certainly, with video screening. Hope I answered that. I haven't heard about.
Hey, I was just going to jump in. Thanks, Brian. Christy, it's excellent. I use it now to screen. I've also been on the other side of it. It is another just fantastic tool, especially during this e-learning time. But the questions are well thought out. You can create your own questions that pertain to Limburg and have our flavor on it, and it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And I, as far as voice, disguising things like that, I haven't seen that. I haven't heard of that in public K-12, the people that I've talked to. That's interesting, but I haven't heard about that.
I think that's probably corporate, big guys like Google and stuff like that. So, okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, it's my turn then. As everybody has said before, the coloring is black is the new, so I'm going to focus on the black in my section. But I do appreciate the consistency that we're doing it each department now. My how is easy on business and finance is to optimize resources and secure funding. And then the what, strategic budgeting, cost containment, cash flow management, debt servicing, and accurate record keeping. And then I did add the 3 sections under each of the implement, research, and investigate section types. Is there's like maximizing resources, operational efficiency, and then customer service and transparency. So as we go through it, you'll see that same format with all of the departments that I manage. So I'm just going to touch on the black. So implement under maximizing resources. We're going to look at piloting with enterprise fleet. You'll see it down later, looking at should we, instead of purchasing all of our fleet vehicles, is there a break even, or is there a better way to have those leased and turned over? I looked at it in the past a little bit, but want to explore a little bit more now. I have it in this section because we have a security vehicle that needs to be replaced badly. So it's a good one to start with and pilot with that one, just to see how the whole program works and if it's a benefit for saving money. So really, I guess that one should probably go under operational efficiency, not maximize resources. But then under customer transparency, one of the RFPs that we want to do this year is we want to look at the 403B vendor platform. As you know, right now we're with Ed Plus, or that program through VALIC, and we're just going to see what other opportunities are out there with a 403B vendor platform. We like to have a vendor that has a wide area of investments, but will allow us to funnel everything through one, just mainly because of the like when people make withdrawals and things like that, there's a lot of compliance issues with 403Bs. And if we have the right vendor do it and they manage all of those, then we're just have less risk for the district if we have a vendor manage that. Currently, VALIC does that for us, but we want to look at other people who do the same thing. This one is a repeat, well, not a repeat, it's early childhood special ed funding. This, as you guys know, this one is on the table. It probably was under a repeat because Tara's looking at the same thing, but my part on that would be the funding part of early childhood special ed versus the special school district. Bond rating agency ratings, we want to look at, we're not looking at any new bonds right now, but as we do years out, we want to make sure that we get the highest rating we can. There's 2 different rating agencies, and both of them treat schools a little differently. So we want to explore the difference between S&P and Moody's, and some schools even do both companies as a bond rating. So we want to explore that, see what's best for Limburg. Here's a repeat again of that district fleet management process, lease versus own of all of our vehicles. Operational efficiency, we want to look at paperless business office. HR is ahead of us in that, and I don't like it. No, so we're going to look at going that avenue within business office. Investigate federal program funding and local effort. We just want to take a deep dive, and Tara and I have been talking about this for a while, and with all of our staff, just get together and look at all of our federal funding and explore the options and make sure we're maximizing that. Summer school funding, we also wanted to, now that we're on the formula, we do get funding for summer school. So we want to make sure that we are optimizing our revenue in that area and setting parameters for summer school. So we'll be doing some of that this year too with the program. Another way, now that we're on the formula, to get revenue from the state is we actually can get basic formula money on our attendance hours for tutoring, and that's the tutoring after school. which I know sometimes that goes on right now. We just have to set some parameters to meet the formula requirements, and Tara and I will be working on that together. And then just a good idea is to we want to look at all of our purchase services throughout the district and review it with the contract audit. Look at we're getting what we were contracted to get, also look that we're paying what we're contracted to get. And so that will be something that my business team will work on over the next year. Skipping down to just the new, which is the black. These are really just more tactical things in the business office, but we want to continue to expand the purchasing card use. It's going well. Everybody's doing the right thing with internal controls. I mean, purchasing cards are good as long as you have the controls, and people are understanding how to use it and what those controls are. So we want to expand that. We also, again, we did the cell phone use is probably done, so that one should be done. But and then the cloud version of System, we have that operating, and that has worked out really, really well. We want to expand on that, but it's worked out really well, especially with the virtual stuff that we've been having to do. Yeah, these are the complete. So that's why I'm saying black. It's complete. I shouldn't be reading that because it's complete. So that one really should probably be, I don't know what color complete's supposed to be. Implement, this is under transportation. We'll get down to that one. There's a lot of complete, so I got to make sure I'm reading the right black. But maximizing resources, again, when we contract it with First Student, we have secured with them 4 different programs of efficiency analysis annually. So we're working through the first one this year that they're working on reports and studies with us on, and we're going to do the next one for the next year. So both of those are continued new reports, but continued efficiencies. Investigate, the big investigate this year is I want to look at the activity trips and the shuttle process. You know, at the middle schools, kids shuttle home after their afternoon activities, and we want to make sure that we're doing that the best way we can. Another option that a lot of the school bus companies are coming out with are smaller options like vans to transport students instead of the big yellow school bus that's 84 passenger. I'm thinking that a lot of these might work out for us on, you know, our PEG shuttlings or things between buildings instead of setting an 84 passenger bus to take a middle school kid to the high school for a class. It's probably a better idea to use a small van. So we're going to look at that this year. All right, I'm going to skip the complete. Food service, we just want to spend a little bit more time, and we had hot and heavy with food service this year with having a new vendor and having kiosk and doing not doing satellite cooking and having all the commodities. So this year we want to really spend a lot more time with our food service vendor on program goals and data collection, benchmark setting, and that kind of stuff. So go away from just the implementation and now start building a process around of all our activities and studying that data. I'm excited this year, SIS is offering online free and reduced meal applications. So we won't have all of that paper in the district. It's not our paper because we don't print them out, the parents do, but it'll be much easier if parents can do that online in lieu of sending them all in the mail to us or to the buildings. And then SFE is our food service vendor, but you have to think about it as those people are working in our district, and it's hard to keep food service workers anywhere right now. And right now our food service workers they're at minimum wage. So I'd like to explore what other St. Louis Metro schools do with their food service, where they start out at. Of course, anything that we would do in that area, we have to look at our contract rates, and we'd pay a little bit more. But I still think it's important to have the consistent food service workers in our buildings. They're important to the kids. The kids see them every day. Right now, or last year or two, we've used a lot of temp agencies just because we can't keep personnel employed under the new vendor or the old vendor. It was a consistent problem. So I think we need to look at what other schools are doing in that area. We do have a food truck. It's already here actually. And so we'd like to put that in place next year. It will offer all reimbursable meals. So kids that are on free and reduced will be able to, utilize the food truck meals just like anybody who pays. So it will meet all nutritional guidelines. And I know the building principals are excited about it because you can actually go on a field trip and have the food truck come there. We're excited if we ever get back to school about using it at the high school when everybody's out in the outside eating, that we'll be able to have that out there as another option. And then of course, you've heard about this at a board meeting, but we are adding some branded food options. Those are already in place. They would be in place if we were here. We have a couple things happening, but we're going to continue to explore that because we found that that is something that the Limburg kids desire, is the branded options. The other thing within the kitchen is the kitchen equipment is ours, even though we have a vendor that is our resource and runs the program for us. We really do need to look at what we have out there and inventory it and things that need to be replaced. We did spend some money this year when we got the kiosk, and then just go away from the satellite, but it's not an area where we regularly have a rotation schedule for kitchen equipment. So there's some pretty old stuff out there, and I like to build a rotation schedule for that. And then for customer service and transparency under food service, of course, we're going to look into the Go Green, no styrofoam, that kind of stuff. We'll have that as a project this year. Skip the green. Community ed, we're working with Jason Kanidik on these, and we're in the process of implementing the facility use procedures and fees. We're talking with, of course, this year transitioning because of what the early childhood center is doing, looking more like a school, transitioning the Flyers Club, which is more like a community service, out from under the preschool program and into community ed. Just seems that's the place for it, just like the Y or anything like that would be. So we're working on that transition. We believe that that will bring some operational efficiency to that program. Staffing based on student enrollment, making sure our Flyers Club, that we have kids there, have staff there when we need them. We send them when we don't need them, save expenditures. With Jason's program, he is seeking how to provide higher level athletic instruction for students. He thinks that's something that he needs to grow the community ed program in the district. We already have some fee assistance. We've been working with Tara on that for students in the programs, but we would like to expand that. And then elementary school facilitators, what that means is sometimes there's an overlap between the end of the school day and the start of a community ed program, and then there's not somebody there to get the people in the right place. So some districts have facilitators that, bridge, I guess, that change of programming, and that helps people get where they need to be. It also helps with safety, so we're going to investigate that, what other schools are doing. We're working with the middle school and elementary schools. We're doing the facility use, but we want to make that part as a field use coordinator as well. Copy center, we're doing a lot of stuff there. We have the new copiers coming in, but what we're going to implement this year is the utility software, badge access on all the machines. There's a monthly report to buildings on their usage. I think them having that in front of them will be more helpful. And then standardizing paper options for instructional use. We just have tons of different colors there, special requests, and we want to just become more standardized with that. And then our goal is to, have more strategic location of copiers throughout the building so that teachers can access them very conveniently throughout the district. We're looking into student printing options. We do have students printing to the printers right now, so we want to make sure when a student needs to print, we're keeping that option available. I know one-to-one makes it a little bit different, but Dominic and Tara are working on that with me under research. School facilities. We will be, of course, implementing our energy conservation program this year, but we're going to try to dive a little bit more into the deferred maintenance. We do have that software program, and we're just going to learn more the tricks and trades of that software and do a better job of now managing our deferred maintenance. As all this new stuff comes in, we want to make sure we keep that program accurate. We were supposed to go to a big, I guess, conference about that program and getting it set up right, but that did not happen. So we will try to get that in place next year. And then I do want to remind everybody that, you know, our facilities crew, a lot of them they do keep up with their professional learning, and I want to make sure that there's a standard for that. Quite a few of them are certified in different things, or they have certification from the school facilities, kind of like MOASBO or MASA. They have certification from that program on being expert facilities staff. So we want to make sure that we have consistent PD for those people, and we give them time. With the energy conservation stuff we're putting in place, we need to make sure that all of our HVAC guys and our electricians and all of them are up to square on energy conservation and monitoring those equipments. So we want to make sure that that happens. And now it's Beth's turn, unless somebody has questions for me. So
I was gonna say, don't try to skirt the questions, Joelle.
I didn't.
One. All right. Although I don't hear any, so I think it is Beth's turn.
I'm just saving it for later for my budget. Right?
There you go.
All right. Well, our communications goals, our whats have all stayed the same, but we've added some new items underneath these. And as you all know, we completed the communications audit this fall. So that gave us some really good framework to do our work and look at how we're going to communicate next year. We got a lot of good information from that audit, and we used it to build these communications goals, but we'll also use it as we're developing those tacticals to support each goal in our plan. So I did want to focus mainly on the first implement here. So I have my book here, so I'm going to get my gold star because we read what school could be with our admin team, but then my department read it too. And I want to tell Tara that my action item that I wrote in my book is this first implement. So excited to have that as part of our compass goals, because as we read it in our communications department, we really had a different conversation about what school could be. We are really talking about it from the standpoint of what does our community need to understand and know, and how can we help define success for them by telling stories about students' success and how that looks different. So when you see this create a community conversation around defining student success, you saw some of this in Tara's goals already, including the family education series. We even talked about doing a community-wide book study where we're sharing what our leaders are reading and having conversations about books like these, and then working it into our video communication and our social media communication. Really just expanding that. Our team, even though we work in the school district and we understand and support it, we try to also, as well as we can, maintain that perspective of the community member, so that we can make sure that if we understand what we're talking about as we're working with Tara and as we're working with the things that are happening, that our community members can understand that too. So that's our primary goal, and I think what we'll build a lot of our efforts around next year. Then I want to point out here under research, we have done a lot with our branding and logo standards for the district, but we are going to start researching logo and brand standards for our high school athletics program. We feel like that's an area where we can really do a lot of good work and even bring in our parents and our coaches and our community to do that work and get their input. So that's something we're going to start looking into to have that consistent look and feel for all of our athletic teams. And then you'll see also in our ongoing incorporating the 5-year compass, the strategic plan into all of our branding and materials. Going back up to our success conversation, during Dr. Lake's listening and learning tour, he asked everybody to fill out a survey and asked them to use one word that they would use to define student success. And we've put those all into a new Wordle that we are going to display in our central office as well. And that's just a really neat picture of how does our community define success. And so continuing to look for ways to display that. And then looking now as we communicate effectively with all audiences, and we continue to do that, we've done a lot of work this year with Terrell Baker, our new security coordinator, and we're going to continue working with him to develop a crisis communications plan and really update that and implement regular safety communication for our families as well. And then the second bullet point is really about working with Tara's department and all of our central office departments, but to make sure that communications plans are woven into the timelines of initiatives and everything that we're doing, so that we're really working with them from the outset to make sure that as they're planning and putting new things in place, we're thinking about communication with them all along the way and the timeline for that. I'll skip through some of these and keep scrolling down. Under research here at the top of the next page, you'll see how to communicate effectively with students. That came out of some of our student impact study groups and just talking with teaching and learning and getting their feedback about how do we communicate the most effectively with students. We know email is not always the best way to do that. And just so working with them, and especially with our high school students, saying how do we get our messages to them and make sure that we're communicating clearly as well with that audience. And then at the bottom of the research here, looking into developing a patron advisory committee to ensure clarity of communication, but also equity of communication. And this is, again, part of just putting on that other lens and looking at all the things we're communicating out and making sure that it's understandable to all of our audiences and that we're really being clear. And then let's see, I'm going to scroll through this pretty quickly. You'll see here we put the communications audit as a complete. The reorganization of the communications department is a complete as well. And I just say to that we have, I'm really proud and happy of the team that we have. We have a lot of talents, different talents that complement one another. And I think especially partnering with the foundation as well, we've brought a whole new perspective in. And so we're really doing some good work in our team and have a lot of different skills. So that leads us into the next goal: engage the community in support of our district initiatives, programs, and employees. And a lot of the new items here focus on the foundation and the Alumni Association and just the work that we're doing with them. So increasing the alumni and community engagement during homecoming, expanding the teacher grant program for the foundation, transitioning high school scholarship applications and scoring totally online. That started this year and again was partially a result of our new virtual world, but just really formalizing that. And then developing the Think a Teacher program to expand beyond and include all staff. That's for the foundation as well. And expanding and growing Limburg Lights the Way programs. We've also seen a tremendous support for Limburg Lights the Way over the past several weeks. And so really building that program and supporting them. And then just continuing to research. We didn't quite get to this last year, so we're continuing it to work and see how do we really drill into all the talent and all the resources that we have in our alumni and keep them connected and even create experiences for students based on all the knowledge and the resources that we have in that group, and keep continuing to connect with those alumni as well. And then just continuing to grow and continue the foundation's fundraising efforts, including the community breakfast and those other areas as well. So I went through that kind of quickly, but does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Beth, I would just like to comment, Beth, your pace was really, really good. You did good.
Thank you. I had some prompting. I tried to keep it concise.
Not that I don't appreciate you other three.
No, that was really good. I love the in-depth look that we get at the work that you're doing through this document and the 3 tiers of investigate, research, implement. I think that's a great document, and it's out there on our website and people can look at it and see what's kind of happening over time It's good stuff. So appreciate it. So any general comments before we move on to our budget? If not, then we'll go back to Joelle.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So let's see. Host disabled. Sorry, somebody needs to let me share. Who is it?
Colin.
Colin?
Make her a co-host.
You now have screen sharing ability.
Thank you, Colin. Let's see. Now I gotta make sure I know where it's at. That's bad. Wasn't here. Okay.
So before Joelle starts, I just want to kind of frame this a little bit. Obviously, everyone is aware that we are in these uncertain times, and information we know now about our budget may look different in a few months as we move forward. We fully anticipate giving you a little bit more in depth of some details. Remember, in June, we established a end of the year, fiscal year workshop or board meeting that we just kind of closed the books on the fiscal year. So either in the regular June board meeting or in that one, we'll probably have some better ideas of where we ended the year financially. Because, you know, there's services right now that we had budgeted that we don't have to pay for now, but then there's also new work that we weren't anticipating as far as like the amount of energy and effort it's going to take to get summer school up, delivering it differently this year and paying, you know, staff and people to do that. Just thinking about getting our 6 through 12 teachers on canvas to get ready for August in case we're still kind of in a similar situation. So we just don't know where all that money, how that's all going to shake out with things that we're not having to pay for now, but other expenses between now and the end of the fiscal year that we weren't anticipating as well. So we'll have a little more detailed information, but this will give you a higher level of kind of where we are. And this is based on conversations that I've had and Joelle has had with the state as far as where finances are going to be. And I'll remind the group that Joelle shared with you what the governor had anticipated, you know, withholding from us. She shared with you what she thought that amount was, and it was very minimal. It's going to have very little impact on our budget as we sit today. Again, this situation we're in doesn't change daily. It can change every hour or every 15 minutes, it seems like. So what you're seeing today is where we are now. Just understand that in June, it may look a little different, and we'll get into more of that in the details in June. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joelle.
Just some basics on budget timeline. You guys know this, but how the board looks at the budget. This is really one of the first steps. We're doing a lot of work here for a long time, but the workshop is an important part of delivering that information to the board. I really like how we're doing it now with the compass goals and the workshop being together because they're weaved together, and it's important. We can't really do one without the other. So I think it's maybe a long meeting, but it's very valuable information, and it's a lot of work that we've done here prior. So we have this, we start with the workshop, and then again in June, late June, which I appreciate that too, doing it later in June, because things can happen. You know, as we set our budget, we're always setting it way before we have the final information. So we don't want that to delay us and stop us from taking action and getting things done, but we want to make sure we keep you guys apprised of anything new we have. And then we do the monthly review of budget to actuals by the finance committee. You know, that's a great thing. They look at the finances each month. And so we're very transparent with that. And then doing the amendments monthly has been very helpful as well. So our budget development goals, again, I want to put it at the top that the compass district goals are really what leads the budget. We want to make sure that our priority on funding is around that document. And it's a lot of work. Everybody has a lot of ideas and we're doing a lot of things. But having a document that we can go back to and put with the budget is very important because that's where our money is being spent. But and besides the compass goals, what we're always doing is planning for enrollment growth. We're looking at a little over 100 kids have been growing a year. That has been continuing, so we always have to plan for that. We want to manage our class sizes. We have the defined class size matrix right now, which makes the budget part really easy of that. So we go in, do our check marks, and we decide where our staff is at as far as class sizes. Of course, top priority is competitive wage, salary, and benefit packages. We're looking at not stopping, always addressing operational efficiency in all areas. So we don't feel like that is an area that is ever going to go away. We think everything's off the table, and then we're going to keep looking for more. So just something we did today could need to be revised in 5 years from now. So we address those ongoing. We are also important of the Limburg tradition of the balanced budget as a balanced operating budget. So when we look at new revenue and new expenditures for a year, we want to make sure that they're in line. And then with that said, though, we want to have an operating budget that balances, but we do have fund balance. And when it's unrestricted fund balance, we want to invest in things like what we're doing. We've invested in a lot of things in our buildings this year, things that needed to be facility-wise upgraded and work, because we didn't spend the dollars for that. So if we have some funds sitting there for whatever reason it is, if something was cheaper this year and we had funds left, then we can take that money and spend it wisely in our building. So I think we did a great job of doing that this year in the capital area. Budget development process, like I said, it starts really the whole year we're working on it. But we really intensify around the time we start negotiations with teachers in March through May. The process is very intensive with building administrators, district directors. Everybody is really more involved in their budget process right now. And I know it's hard on some of them because they're learning a lot. But it really is, when they're looking at budget and then talking to us, we're both learning so much. So the time investment is a lot more. And it's a struggle, I think, for the non-finance people to grasp it first, but they're doing great. And we're finding a lot of different things just by having that conversation between the finance people and the people that are in the buildings every day, managing instruction. We gather ideas from everybody. Dr. Lake has a lot of his listening and learning. He has his things with the teachers and the classified staff. And we always act on people's ideas and investigate them. So nothing's ever off the table. We say, yes, we'll look at, and then we come back with data. And then a very big important item that we've been doing the last few years, again, this is with the help of the individual budget managers, because they know what they spend their money on, is spending a lot of time on trend analysis and detail line items. So it's a lot of work, but it's really comes out well. So when we get to the funding sources, of course, you know, we have 3 major funding sources. Of course, local revenue is our highest funding source. It's the majority of what we need to survive. Even with us now being on the formula, the local revenue is still the prime revenue source for the district. And then, of course, you rotate between the reassessment and non-reassessment years, and that really plays on how your revenue predictions are for the following year. Operating revenue information. Here's, if you look at the yellow, it really shows you, this is, I use current year budget because that number, those numbers are firm, but this makeup is not going to change for the next year's budget as far as our local. I mean, almost 90% of our budget is local funded. Then we have county, which is kind of like fines and forfeitures and some things like that. State, which is primarily the basic formula, and transportation, some other little things in there. And then federal. Federal is only 1% and county is 1%. So the majority of our funding is from the local side. This area over here, I think is just interesting. It just shows as of yesterday when I ran where we're at with our revenue for the year. You know, and then 3 years historical is percent-wise where we're at. So this year we're ending up pretty much consistent where we were in prior years, and our sources are not going to change at all. But we're operating wise, you know, almost $100 million budget here. What drives that 87% or 90% rounding up on that is, of course, our local tax rate. Always like to have this history just because it's something that you don't look at all the time, but where our tax rate has been over the years, as well as assessed valuation. Of course, the minuses and the reds, you know, the minuses are when assessed valuation fell, and the pluses are where when they increased last year, you know, we had that major increase in assessed valuation. And then this year, we're predicting around a 2%. Dr. Lake and I sat down, knowing what the CPI is, which is the next line. I really have that highlighted in yellow because that's so important. That's the item that really tells us what we can grow. So on these years that I have highlighted, it shows which one we had to go with. So if the CPI is higher than or lower than the actual growth, let's say last year is a great example, it's 17% AV growth, and CPI was only 1.9, that's why you look down here at the bottom, we had to roll back our levy. This is part of the whole, the Hancock agreement with the state is that taxpayers will be held harmless against major increases in AV. I know there was a lot of legislation out there this year about increases in AV. Mike Chislis and I had talked about some of those, but this is, there already is a, you know, control in there for that. But a lot of people saw increases last year, so I think it hit legislative wise. The bad part is when you look back at our history is, you know, usually when CPI is good, our AV is different. So here we had a CPI growth of 3%, but AV went down 3.9. So we're limited with what we can do. These are really the major factors is the growth in AV, which is real estate, personal property, and then the inflation rate set by the state. There's many inflation rate factors. The state gives us which one to use. They give us that number in March every year. The rest of this is what our tax levy looked like and how it was broken down for those years. Of course, they used to be able to put money in capital projects. You still can, but you don't have to. The formula kind of changed. So we just transfer money there as we need it. Debt service has its own levy, and then there's the operating levy. So again, here I just touch about why CPI is so important. It really sets the tone for our budget. The ideal thing is for CPI to equal actual growth. You know, if they told us 2.3, comes in at 2.3, and then everything is happy. But it being a non-reassessment year, the county does not give us any estimates of growth or new construction. We will get our first data from the county in late July, and then the final data, of course, in September, which we adopt the budget in June. So that's why it's so important to bring amendments when that data is firmed up. New construction, we get that every year. Again, we don't have an estimate for this year from the county. They do provide that on reassessment years, but what we have sat down and talked about, Dr. Lake and I, is a 3-year average where we were the last 3 years, and then average that as a prediction for next year. This color-coded chart shows you the different categories of new construction for the past 3 years. New construction is all new money because that property wasn't there before. Before the virus hit, you know, we were seeing lots of activity up and down Sappington and Limburg with revitalization of different buildings, and we're hoping for a better new construction number. Reserve funds, why do district needs reserve? Very apparent, just like why you need a savings account. And I have those noted here. Unexpected costs. This is a good year to illustrate, you know, what happens with this thing that's going on now that has never happened before. You know, to be able to have some money in the bank in case things go awry is important. To pay unexpected costs and then cover revenue shortfalls. But we've been able, because of some fund balance, to fund some projects that need it, especially in the area of facilities. I like this picture. This is from my new analytical tool, which I love, my SIS hosted environment. This shows you over the course of the year. The blue is, of course, I think keeps shrinking. I can't see it. The revenue, and then the other is the expenditures. So just to drill in that point that, you know, we get most of our revenue around this time of year, and then we're living off it for the other term. This shows 2 years of expenditure, so that's interesting. Of course, we haven't finished this year yet, so we'll be able to share this when the year is over. Another good chart that comes from that tool is our reserves. You know, in June when we do our financials and we do our state report, and on the front of that state report is, you know, our fund balance. We tell the state what it is, they blast it to the world. Well, that's really not a great reflection of our fund balance. Looks like we got a ton of money in the bank, but you know, we have to live off of that. As you can see, after June, we start driving down, and November is our lowest month. We felt like we were a little bit better this November, and hopefully we'll be even more better the next, with going on the formula, having more revenue from the state. That is a monthly check, where the local money is one time, December, January. So having that monthly check, we were a little bit better off this year in November, and I hope for that to continue. This is also our capital projects, which is not bond money. So sometimes it gets confusing because we have capital money that's bond money, and then we have capital money that's operational money. And that operational money is what we use to take care of our facilities mainly, but also technology. We spent some money on technology in that area this year with our much needed access point, you know, additions. So that's where we buy large capital improvements and improvements to the building for technology. On the expenditure side, all funds, we of course have operating funds, debt, and capital. Here's the two portions of capital. One is an operating capital and the other is bond issue. This also came from the analytic program, but it shows you that 78% of our expenditure budget is, of course, salaries. So purchase service and supplies, that's a lot of stuff in there, but salaries is the biggest piece. And then we have capital, which is a combination of mainly our bond funds. You know, we have a lot of money in the bank right now because of Prop R. And that is really one-time money. And as we do the projects, I just sent the check in for the permit for the Cub to be paid for. So that money is going to start dwindling over the next couple months, we hope. And then our debt is just our principal and interest on debt. This kind of gives you an idea of where we're at this year as compared to previous years at the same point. And it is interesting because you can see some of our accounts like supplies, we've spent less. Well, we've been out of school a little bit longer. And some of our even wages maybe down a little bit because of subs and part-time staff that aren't getting as many hours. But our budget's not going to look a lot different next year. Of course, where we're going to see the biggest increase as always is in the area of salaries. We are not seeing any benefit increase this year. I mean, our self-funded program is working out great. Nan does a great job with that. Brian and her have spent a lot of time looking at our rates and things like that. And we don't have any increases this year. I think the wellness is helping with that as well. So thinking ahead to next year, we know it's a non-reassessment year, unknown growth in real estate values. County does not provide the estimates. I really think it's too late for the COVID to affect this year on our real estate values. Next year may be a different thing with commercial. But this year, I think where we're going to be once we know those numbers. We haven't seen much growth in personal property. And so that's why we use the 3-year average on that. New construction, again, is one of the areas, but we won't know that until we get the data from the state. And we know that inflation is relatively low. So this is better since you guys can see it on the screen. Just imagine if I was projecting this at the board meeting, you'd have to get your magnifying glass out or stand up and get close to the screen. But these are really our estimates at this point. And we have not heard, you know, little we've heard from the state. There hasn't been a crisis situation at this point. So property taxes, again, is our biggest area with new construction. And then this is assuming a 2% growth rate. Prop C, sales tax. That was already down a little bit, believe it or not, when we ran these in late March. And I'm sure that will be impacted next year, but we feel like this is a really good number for this year. And the state has not said that they're really thinking that there will be a rebound, but how long that rebound will happen will be interesting. So we feel secure about this number. We talked a lot about interest earnings this year. Our interest earnings, still the number we were using was low. So we feel good about that. There will be more interest earnings. And we've done a better job, I believe, in making sure we're investing and paying attention to our investments. The MOSIP series has a lot of term investments where you can put money out, not even short term, but still higher rates. And we're making sure with Dawn here that we're managing and staying on top of earnings. Basic formula is driven by, that's the state money. Of course, it's driven by enrollment. They have not changed any factors on that yet, our state adequacy target. So we're looking at our state projection, the new money in these areas at about 2.5 million. The other area, when you can't increase revenue, what do? Reduce expenditures so that you can repurpose them. Over the last 2 years, it's been about a 500, I told Dr. Lake that I looked at this, came up with this number and we worked through it. And then we were just curious what number I had last year, and it was right around 500,000. So over the 2-year period, it's been about $1 million of just repurposing money, or, you know, spending time with people on their budgets and figuring things out that don't make sense or have been done the same way for a long time. Or they didn't even know because they didn't see their budget figures as often. We've done a lot of policy items. Of course, we have in here, we had a classified ERIP this year that did save us some money. Things we're doing with facilities. There's just continuous effort on moving beyond the status quo, and then again, not stopping, just keep looking at how we can reduce expenditures and be more efficient. So together, money that we would have available to spend, new revenue, and reduced expenditures is right at $3 billion. On the expenditure side of that, the majority of it is going to be personnel. And I'm not going to talk too much on that because Brian's going to talk next about the teachers agreement and how that worked. But this, you know, that is really what leads the process with our looking at wages, is our negotiation period. And then that goes through the process and kind of funnels downhill or uphill, whatever you want to say, to the rest of the staff. And this also has attrition in it. Brian can talk about how many staff members we've had are leaving this year or retiring. That really helps because our reduces our expense, and we can spend that on salaries. We do have in here some additional staff, which there are several, even since we first put out this document, that we as a cabinet have sit down and said, no, let's hold these. Let's put a hold on these. You know, we're going to include them in the budget. We're going to keep them in the picture, but we're not going to make those hires right now until we get a little bit further down the road to see the impact of the COVID virus. But we always have a prediction for growth, and then we have needs in other areas, which Brian, Tara, Dr. Lake, we all sit down with the buildings, and we sit down with the directors, and we talk about their needs. We look at student needs. And that's how we've spent a lot of time coming up with their additional staff. It doesn't come easy, I will tell you that. Technology is a big item this year, as we know, going one-to-one. Next year, we really need some more support in training for that program. I know that's important to the board too, as these roll out, that everybody is trained appropriately. So we've dedicated some additional money to technology, and then just laptops and equipment, et cetera. So Dominic has done a really good job repurposing his money in his budget so that we don't have to come up with a lot of money for technology. It's really hats off to him and Tara and that team that how we're funding one-to-one. We're looking at doing more leases than purchasing, and it's really working out well. And then teaching and learning additional staff. Those are important things just based on really all of this committee work and our compass goals. It really drives what staff we're adding. So I don't know if anybody, or you want to, Dr. Lake, want to talk about anything about the staff or technology or anything at this point?
No, I think you hit it, you know, the highlights of it, but Dominic has done a really good job of owning his budget and finding and being efficient in there. Because they'll take you back a couple of years ago, you know, the conversation was, well, how can we afford this, or how can we do that? And so we, you know, put our heads together and some pencil to paper, and we figured it out for our community so our kids can have that learning tool. And again, remember, technology is just a learning tool. It's not how, all experiences will be for our kids. So we're excited to see that. We definitely want to make sure that the professional learning piece is there. And Tara, I know, has a plan for all of that. And you guys have seen the rollout schedule. Again, we may, because of the environment we're in right now, I don't know if we can even get them here, but maybe pushing up the purchase of the iPads for middle school a little quicker. But I don't even know if we can get them here yet. But that is some of our conversation. So, and Tara, feel free to kind of chime in about that. We also had, we're adding some counseling support, which is really, really important. But I do want to say we had some other things in here for growth and support for our teachers that we pulled out because of the COVID situation. We just weren't comfortable moving forward with that. Add to the budget. We felt like we could move forward with compensation and things like that, but actual new positions that we had targeted, we went ahead and pulled those back out of the budget when we got into this situation. So we felt like we just would be more comfortable not moving forward with those. So, Tara, you have anything you want to say about those positions or technology?
So one of the things that I think has been really powerful as we think about the technology professional learning is a combination of investing in our own staff as well as using external resources. So this year, as we've gone through the technology impact study, we've really been able to use Apple Professional Learning, and that has been a great growth experience for our teachers who've been part of that process, as well as Colin and Doug, our STEM and our blended learning coordinator, who will do a lot of the professional learning. We're actually putting them through certification with Apple so that we can kind of utilize them in-house ongoing coaching, and then still partnering with the Apple Professional Learning. One of the advantages to doing a lease to purchase the iPads is that we get a discounted rate on Apple Professional Learning coaches and their daily rate, and we can use it over the entire term of the lease. So we're able to put those things in there, spread out the cost, and then use it based on what our needs are at the time. So I think that combination of those two professional learning components are going to really meet the diverse needs of our teaching staff.
Was this the last slide, Joelle?
No, I just have a bottom line slide next. This is
Okay.
just really it. I have newer repurposed items, in and then, out, and, a balanced budget is what we're looking at as far as the operating side.
So Joelle, does that mean I have $1,100 I can still spend?
No.
No, misspend it. No.
So that's good. I just want to hit on just a couple of things that we are doing, a lot of difference in leasing. I mean, we're leasing computers, we're looking at leasing copiers, we're, this with our Esco thing and performance contracting, that's kind of considered somewhat of a lease. So there's just different financing tools being used. And I do believe that it's opening up options for the district as well. So a new big item that we're going to see, of course, is our Esco energy savings. We're paying for those improvements that are happening a lot, most of them this summer in the building, with looking at energy savings. And so that's going to fund investment in our facilities. So that's an exciting thing that's, a lot of work to get there, and that is going to actually be hitting the books next year. Something to keep an eye on and watch. And then our debt service. So this year we won't have to have 2 bond issue sales and all of that. We have all of our money in the bank now for debt service, and start spending on our prop. But our debt service, of course, we work closely with Piper Sanders on that. And we, when we went out to get these 2 bond issues and had to do credit ratings and that kind of stuff, I mean, our credit worthiness is really high in this district, and we continue to manage our debt appropriately. We always look at refinancing things to make sure that we're getting it paid and getting it paid at the best rate. So that is an ongoing debt service, is something that we always manage as well. So summarizing real quick, this is really what we're focusing on. Compass Goal leads that. And then I get to Dr. Lake's favorite slide. Oh, I thought I put a big question slide in here, but I didn't. So that's it. we're at the end of the program. So if you guys have questions, I'd be glad to ask. I know it's kind of overwhelming right now, so you can always come visit me or call me or do things like that to dive in it a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Joelle. And just for the whole group, I guess, to say thank you to not just you, but all the department heads, because I think you guys take seriously looking at how we can trim it and repurpose the dollars, and it's
They are all
amazing.
working hard.
Yeah, another 500,000 this year. So you're looking for a head nod that you're on the right direction. Any questions or anything that people want you to look at?
Yes.
You guys speak up or get in touch with Joelle. Over the coming weeks, this is really just for us to see what direction they're headed with the budget, and have a chance for input before we vote on it. So if you guys have any questions right now, speak up. Otherwise, Joelle, thank you very much.
Very nice.
Okay, we good to move on, guys?
Yes.
I see head nods. Okay. So we're going to skip all the way to 9.0. We have 3 action items by consent. If I could have a motion to approve those as they are presented.
So moved, Mike. Yes.
Second.
All right, that was Jen. All right, Karen Schuster is a yes. Mike Tishless is muted. I think he nodded. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Mike Shamia,
Yes.
Jennifer Miller,
Yes.
Christy Watts,
Yes.
Kathy Lorenz,
Yes.
and Matt Alonso.
Yes.
All right. Oh, you know what? I apologize. I didn't ask for questions or anything like that. I should have done that. Were there any questions or discussion?
No.
Okay, my apologies. Sorry, guys. All right, so motion carries 7-0. Which means we move to adjournment now. So if I can have a motion for that.
So moved. Matt.
Second.
All right. I think for adjournment, we can all just kind of give a thumbs up and say yes and nod. All in favor, adjourn? Very good. That motion carries 7-0. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Good workshop.
Guys, nice
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks,
the work.
everybody.
Thanks,
Yeah, have a good
everybody.
evening, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.